July 25th, 2019 meeting of the City of Charleston Audit Committee, which is a committee of the whole. And I'd like to begin with a moment of silence, please. Amen and thank you. Before we begin, fellow council members, there's just a couple of things I'd like to point out to you and seek a little bit of guidance as the chair of the committee. You'll see as on our agenda items number 3, A and B. I'd like to reverse those if you all don't mind. We're going to begin at 3 with a report from Mr. Majernik. We'll then have time for the mayor, and then we'll go to question and answer following that, unless there's an objection. My concept of how we do that after the mayor's given his presentation is that we will give each council member 10 minutes for question and answer. That'll be a guideline, not a hard, fast number, but just as a guideline. And the way I typed it out in my mind, and this was just, we don't do this very often, is that we would go in order of seniority, either reverse. I thought we'd go actually reverse. So we'll start with our most junior member and go through our most senior member with questions and see how that goes. Right. Well, if we go in reverse, it's the same. So we will hear from Mr. Majernik first. We'll then give time to the mayor. The mayor, I have you penciled in for 30 minutes, if that suits you okay. If you don't need all that time, mercifully we'll accept that too. We'll then go to council member questions and observations. We will then go to item number 4, which is the discussion of the internal auditor report. This is the second in a series of meetings that we've had. I do not know, and I don't think any of us do until we're done with today, through the question and answer period and Mr. Majernik's additional information he's given us, whether we need to have a third meeting, but we will take motions at the end of this meeting to determine that. If we do need to have a third meeting to seek, among other things, guidance or advice from our council, I just had penciled here and just think about it. No need to act right now. August 8th, which is 2 Thursdays from now at 3 p.m. So given that, unless there's any procedural objections, this is just about procedure, we will begin, and I'm going to call, first off, any questions, comments, concerns from my fellow council members in the committee? Great. All right, so the first up, do we have a minute? Pardon me?
Mine's a comment.
Certainly. Sure.
I don't think we should do it this way ever again. And the reason why I say that is it places staff in a very uncomfortable position. I think it's conflicting. Anytime you're assessing your boss, okay, for me that's problematic. And given what we say this is costing, it probably would have been better to do an independent audit. So I'm just thinking that in the future, okay, that for staff's sake alone, okay, we should never ever put them in such a conflicting position, because it's tough to assess your boss. I don't care who it is. Okay.
And I think item number 4 on our agenda will address that.
Okay.
And if we could ask, I think that's a good point. That's the point of number 4.
Okay.
And we will get to that in the course of this meeting. Also recognizing that we do have, after today, this meeting, we have a real estate meeting, a Ways and Means Committee meeting, and a City Council meeting. So we'd like to keep it moving forward. Councilmember Shade.
As a comment, if we're addressing personnel matters, does that kick us into executive session?
We will determine that as we go along, and we'll see what the questions is. I do believe that the internal audit is a matter of public record, and the idea of this audit committee is to take in information about that report that we've gotten and any addenda that you're going to see today and ask questions about it, and we'll see where that leads. But we will all be mindful of that, and if it gets to that point, I'll certainly, as the chair, entertain a motion or suggest one. Okay, with that, Mr. Majernik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilmember Seekings. We have received a few questions, quite a few last Friday. I was out of the office this Monday through Wednesday taking care of my wife, so we have answered as best we could with the time that we have. So if you guys would like to turn to page 19, we have provided an appendix to the report with as many questions that we could answer in the time we have had. So the first question we have received, and these are in no particular order. Number one is it usual for non-city personnel to have travel paid for by the city and then reimbursed? Would other city employees have that privilege to make that happen? Was there a correlation between the ticket bought for Lonnie Hamilton to France and the birthday party thrown using city funds catered and use of the facility for free? So, and what we've tried to do here is answer as many questions as we could to try to limit the time later on, but we'll be happy to entertain any other questions you have as best we can. So the the answer to number one, the city does not typically engage in paying for travel expenses for non-employees, though it has happened in the past in their recreation events. There are many reasons why it could have happened, but it's not a typical practice. The plane ticket to Flours, France, and the 90th birthday party celebration at the City Gallery were for the same individual, Lonnie Hamilton III. Next question we received. How certain are you the Fresh Start program and sister cities are the only two instances where Mayor Tecklenburg increased funding or pushed funding for an organization where Mrs. Tecklenburg acted in a leadership role? So each organization that submits funding for community assistance or a tax dollar submits an application. With that, they have to give proof that they're a 501c3. They also must give a list of their current board of directors. So we have had staff go through all of those applications to ensure that we have everything for which you guys were on the board or listed within those reports. We have also received a list of all the boards that the mayor is actively on, and we are going through that as well to look at the funding for those as well. The next question we have received, has the mayor agreed to pay the $2,700 back for the take-home and auto, and will he be allowed to drive it home until the amount is paid? So the mayor did contact me to verify that $2,700 was the current amount to date and has written a check to cover that amount, which has not been deposited yet, but we do have that check covering that amount of money. The mayor has also chosen to discontinue the use of a city vehicle as a take-home vehicle and will ensure that it's left at the city each night going forward. Next question that we have received, how did the mayor know to pay back certain amounts of monies on the days leading up to the audit report? So before we issued our audit report, part of this process is a question and answer, and it's our due diligence to make sure that we did not miss something in the audit beforehand. So the business day before, on Friday, July 12th, we reached out to the mayor just to make sure, as we were going through our records, we did not miss that reimbursement for those three expenses. He paid it back after we asked about it, so we did keep it in there as a finding as it was listed on the report. So that's how that came to be. Next up, please provide information on how Jack O'Toole has come up with a number of the audit costing over $50,000 aren't members of your department's salaried employees. So the only additional expense that the city has incurred was for our external counsel, which was Collins and Lacey, for the report that Michael Birchstead provided. The additional cost, we estimated we spent about 2 months of time on this. Our salary and fringe benefits total about $15,800 each month. So that for the two employees, that's how we came up with $31,000. But that was salaried expense. That was not additional expense that the city has paid. Next question is, who did the negotiations on behalf of Lewis Walton LLC and the city? How about Chernoff Newman LLC in the city, the Gola Society Inc. in the city, City Bot in the city? Have these individuals and their families contributed to the Tecklenburg campaign? So Lewis Walton was engaged by the mayor's staff on January 25th, 2016. Their founder, Jenny Deeren, did not contribute to the mayor's campaign in 2015, but did contribute in 2019 $100. Later in 2016, the mayor's office staff engaged the services of Chernoff Newman to execute a plan for innovation at the city. Chernoff Newman's contract was coordinated by Phil Noble, who did provide $600 to the city, or to Mayor Tecklenburg's 2015 campaign. Next up, the contract between the Gola Society There is no campaign contribution by the Gola Society. There was one board member, Joan Bryan, who contributed $400, but given the name, it is possible that was a different Joan Bryan. We can't be 100% conclusive that that was the same Joan Bryan. And we also noted as we were looking through the Gola Society's website that Mrs. Tecklenburg is listed on their advisory council as well. And lastly, City Bot was negotiated by the City Procurement Division as a part of the RFP that we issued in 2018, although there were prior communications between City Bot, members of the mayor's staff, and outside contractor counsel Roy Welly. We did not see any contributions from City Bot or its principals in either campaign. The next question we can skip over, and I'm happy to read it, asking about how much money Roy Willie charged by line item, and we have not had a chance to tabulate that by item at this point, and we will work on that and send that out. Next up, we need information on the misspending on entitled office supplies. What were these charges? What were the real uses? And why did the department lie? So internal audit noted $4,951.79 of expenditures incorrectly coded to office supplies. These all but two resulted in P-card transactions where they were classified by either the P-card manager within the mayor's office division or the cardholder themselves. The following provides a summary of what we purchased with those dollars. First of all, and I've grouped this by category of what each was for. So we have coffee and hospitality supplies. That makes up $649.94. That is for coffee cups, creamer, forks, plates. A lot of that had to do with coffee with the mayor that he hosts. And also notice 758 expense, or next up we have the gifts. We have $758 expense to gifts by the mayor's office. We have some photo books at a cost of $26.95, a different photo book at $23.95, purchased on March 8th, an additional two of the $26 photographic book, 3 Charleston Impressions books at $23.95. We have some other books, also some rice spoons. Some of these did have indication on the form that the portrait books were for the Amsterdam trip and the rice spoons were for the Flores France trip to give away. The mayor's office purchased an additional couple books in February 2019, but there was no delineation outside of the two for the Amsterdam and Flores what the use was. Next up, we had some events, and so the mayor's office staff rented some chairs. The first one was for a Church Creek drainage study public meeting held at the Citadel Mall on September 21st, 2017. Cost of that $433.21. Mayor's office rented an additional 250 chairs for a low country or low battery wall event held at Meminger Auditorium, as well as a $500 rental fee for the Meminger Auditorium. We also had meals, which we've already discussed, and some of the meals that were missing, some of the documentation, but we've gone through. Overall, there were $1,439.24 in meals that were coded to office supplies. We had $585 for dues and subscriptions, one for Mr. Josh Martin's APA membership, as well as $49.95 for the mayor's office subscription to the Charleston Regional Business Journal. And lastly, there was a $7 fee for parking where an employee left their badge and had their P card, so charged the parking to get out of the garage. Next question that we had is, did Roy Willie and Sandy Tecklenburg have access to the mayor's email address? And we have no evidence or proof that Roy Willie or Mrs. Tecklenburg had access to the mayor's email. We've asked the mayor, and he had responded that she had not had any kind of access to his email. Next question is, wasn't Mike Wack a member of the campaign and also in office now? So the only proof that we have, or the only documents we have, are based on the spending reports that were submitted to the South Carolina Ethics Commission. There were no monies paid to Michael Wack, though he may have volunteered on the campaign, but we don't have any knowledge of that. Not firsthand knowledge. Next up, we have what are the recommendations or next steps regarding the items that were identified as potential Ethics Act violation, and we are going to defer that to legal counsel, as well as the next question, the next steps regarding the tax dollars without a public purpose. So we'll defer those two questions to legal, as they'll be better suited to answer those. We have one more question that's a couple parts, and we have not had time to dive into this yet, but it's asking about, again, the mayor's service on the boards, if he has received monies from those positions, and the city staff involvement with campaigns. But given the time that we've received this, we have not had a chance to fully answer that. So we have provided what we have so far, but we'll dive deeper into that in the coming weeks. So with that, those are the questions we've received as of last Friday. If you guys have more, we're happy to help where we can.
Get to that. Are there any
Okay.
additions or deletions or edits in the draft that you've given us that includes those questions?
There are no changes to the report itself other than adding the appendix on to the end.
We're going to hand this over to the mayor, then we're going to get into all the questions for him, if that suits you okay?
All right.
And then we'll, as sort of ordered, go. So, Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours. We're going to put the timer on you.
Need that much time.
Thank you.
But thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, I'd like to thank Robert McJernick, who has really done a very thorough job. I'm told that every piece of paper for 4 years, what looks through. Is the mic not working? Testing. Is that a little better? Okay. So thank you for that. And I'm also thankful that upon this review that there are a number of procedures that have been identified that will lead to some process improvement. We all have room for improvement, and this audit will allow us to implement some changes that will make some process improvements for the city, like we do in many other areas. I did want to comment on just a couple of things from the cover letter of the report, and one of them addresses one of the questions that one of the council members asked, where you stated as of today, the mayor has not received a preliminary draft, nor has he had the opportunity to respond to any findings therein. And I just wanted to point out that Mr. McJernick, as he just mentioned in the response to the question, that he met with me as part of the audit, and no draft was ever presented to me prior to our meeting here as a committee. But he did ask the questions about those few travel expenses, which then prompted me to make the 2 payments to him, because it was clear when I looked through it that those items had been inadvertently unpaid. So just for the record, the cover letter also stated regarding numerous emails between my son and my wife and myself, listed my other son's name, John Henry Tecklenburg, but in fact that the emails should refer to my son, Joseph Tecklenburg. So I'm just going to go down the audit report, kind of finding by finding. If you want to follow by the findings, we start with 19005 number 1. And this is a combination of items where the observation is made that they did not feel that a public purpose had been identified. And so I want to identify what those public purposes are. So on first, Dr. Ade Ajani Ofunian, he's commonly known as Dr. O, is a native Charlestonian and the grandson of legendary blacksmith Philip Simmons. He has a master's and PhD in archaeology and adjunct professor at College of Charleston. He is the founder and director of the Gullah Society and has worked with the city on our annual Kwanzaa celebration and played the leading role in the city's efforts to reinter the remains of 36 individuals of African descent, maybe 35 and 1 Native American, uncovered during the recent Gilliard reconstruction. As part of this effort, Dr. O garnered the support and additional funding and resources from the National Geographic Foundation and the University of Pennsylvania. And this allowed for DNA testing, which otherwise would not have been done, for the remains, and a number of our citizens also had DNA testing, leading to a fuller understanding of the African diaspora and its impact here in Charleston. All of this research has benefits to our city and citizens and aptly ties into efforts of the International African American Museum. He has also traveled extensively in in Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. His PhD research and dissertation investigated religious and spiritual development of practitioners in the African diaspora. Given his work within the city, particularly with the reinterment, I asked him to be an honorary ambassador to the African diaspora. Jim French, founder of the Chronicle Communications, honorably served for 20 years in the United States Navy, including service in Vietnam. He earned the Bronze Star and a presidential citation. He founded the Charleston Chronicle and operated it for 45 years, which is now proudly continued by his grandchildren. The Chronicle has served as a community resource and service to the city of Charleston, particularly to our African American community. Mr. French has also been awarded the state's highest civilian honor, the Order of the Palmetto. He endured some challenging times, but persevered to provide a needed community voice and resource. And on the occasion of his 90th birthday, celebrating 45 years of commitment to Charleston, 5 public agencies honored Mr. French in the October 2016 edition of the Chronicle, which included our ad, which included the names of our city council members, the city of Charleston, Trident Technical College, Charleston County, and the Charleston County School District, all placed similar ads honoring not just Mr. French, but the community service of the Chronicle newspaper. Jonathan Green is considered one of the most important contemporary painters of the South, and particularly of the Gullah experience. His amazing artwork earned him the NAACP Key of Life Award in 2009. And earlier this year was recognized by the U.S. Conference of Mayors for his many efforts with the city of Charleston. Jonathan serves as chair of the City of Charleston's Arts Commission and active in the Moja Festival. He conceived and directed the Requiem for Rice project to commemorate the contributions of enslaved African Americans. He has contributed to Spoleto Festival with designs for an amazing Porgy and Bess production 2 years ago, and has provided public art at Sanders Clyde Elementary School in our city. I'm honored that Jonathan Green is willing to volunteer his service as Charleston's honorary ambassador of the arts. Lydia Cotton is a native of Puerto Rico and has lived in the Charleston area for 29 years and is an incredible bridge builder with the underserved Hispanic community in our region. She serves on the City of Charleston's Mayor's Commission on Homelessness, as well as the city's Commission on Women. She serves both cities, the city of North Charleston and the city of Charleston, as a liaison to the local Hispanic community, and we benefit from her outreach. I am honored to have her volunteer service to the city and honor her as an ambassador to the Hispanic community. Lonnie Hamilton has led a lifetime of service to the Charleston community as an educator and elected official. In 1970, Mr. Hamilton became the first elected African American to serve on Charleston County Council. He served until 1994 for 24 years, 2 stints as chairman, and led such efforts as creating our county's recycling program. Yes, a reception was held in conjunction with the County of Charleston to honor his community service. Tom Tisdale managed the finances for the event. Charleston County paid $2,500 towards the honor, substantially more than the city's $1,000, along with private donations. After all was said and done, Mr. Hamilton split the excess funds, it was less than $1,000, between MUSC Children's Hospital and Calvary Episcopal Church on Line Street. We joined with the Charleston Area Convention and Visitors Bureau to host a heroes welcome and reception and weekend of thanks to those 3 Alabama heroes who, by the grace of God, saved the life of a young Charlestonian who had been kidnapped and whose family had been brutalized. The reception also thanked the FBI, the U.S. Coast Guard, the numerous law enforcement and public safety officials who participated in this remarkable recovery. Expenses were shared with the Area Convention Visitors Bureau. We were responsible for the airfare and part of the reception. And unfortunately, I checked flights to Atlanta the other day. It's crazy. You can fly to Los Angeles for a third of what you can get a ticket to Atlanta for. Same thing applies if you try to fly to Alabama or fly here from Alabama. The prices were very expensive, and after a number of solicitations, I did attempt to secure a private plane, but was not able to secure one. So we proceeded to buy airline tickets to bring these heroes here for the reception. Honoring these heroes and public safety officials told it was an amazing event, I'm told, and one we should all be proud of. One of the biggest regrets during my tenure as mayor was the fact that the only weekend that worked for these individuals to come to Charleston was the same weekend that we had already scheduled to go to the Netherlands for our study there. So I was not present at the event. Sandy Tecklenburg's business cards. I've responded to this issue at length during a prior council meeting. So I will just very briefly say that her commitment and service to the city of Charleston as our First Lady has been remarkable in so many ways. We've attended U.S. Conference of Mayors meetings. We've been delighted to meet other mayors, both male and female, whose spouses are also actively engaged in their cities. I have reimbursed the city for the differential in printing costs, and I have often used our joint card proudly. I would respectfully submit to you that all of these fine individuals and all these efforts of recognition mentioned bring benefit and purpose to the city of Charleston and its citizens. Other question costs, $44 per diem expense. It was noted in the report that the mayor, quote, was not seeking reimbursement for this day, but finance inadvertently included it anyway, end quote. I have repaid the $44 to the city as it was never requested by me. Finding 19-005 number 2, observation. The mayor's office staff have charged travel for non-city personnel to the city's credit card. The assumption being that that would be somehow out of procedure. This is the method, by example, prior to my being sworn in, that I believe was the normal method, the modus operandi. I have an email from Kathy Baker, who was Mayor Riley's assistant, sent to me on December 10th of 2015 as we were planning my first trip to the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in Washington, D.C. in January. Quote, if Mayor-elect Tecklenburg plans to go, I will be happy to register him and book his flight and hotel so that it can be paid in advance by the city, end quote. Well, no, I'll proceed one sentence more. If Mrs. Tecklenburg would like to accompany the mayor-elect, just let me know. Thanks. So after offering to accommodate Mrs. Tecklenburg as well. So this is how I was introduced to mayor's travel arrangements in the city of Charleston. I would observe also that there has been an inconsistency over how reimbursements have occurred. With only a dozen or so transactions, finance has requested deductions be made from the TA2 form, essentially deducting Sandy's expense from my reimbursement, which is fine to do it that way. Finance has also requested payroll deductions as a method of payment. And in addition, I have written checks for reimbursement. So with only about a dozen transactions, it was handled 3 different ways, and it's easy to conceive that a mix-up could occur. So to rectify any confusion going forward, I have instructed Michelle and my staff that all travel expenses for me and Sandy will be charged to my personal American Express account. Then it'll be up to me to apply for the reimbursement. And I guess if I'm forgetful, it's on me and not on the city. But to address specifically the 2 unpaid charges in question, January 20 of 2016 for $214.10. It's noted in the draft report that finance, quote, in paying back Mayor Riley's credit card, the charge was posted to mayor's office travel rather than due from third party, and therefore was inadvertently omitted from reimbursement requests. Hence, no one ever asked me for reimbursement until Mr. Majernik presented this to me on July 12, 2019, at which point I promptly paid the $214.10. And I must admit, this was a confusing arrangement. We went up to Washington. I had already fully paid for Sandy's round-trip ticket. And while we were up there, this big snowstorm blew in. In addition to that, Sandy got sick with the stomach flu, we knew we had to get on out of town. And rather than try to make changes, we decided just to buy a new ticket and get on home, as quickly as we can. And so I think that added to the confusion as well. The other ticket was for $234.40 for a January 2018 trip to Washington, was another inadvertent admission. Admittedly, finance notified Michelle, my assistant, by email. During that week, Michelle either was on vacation or out sick, but she overlooked the email when she got back and never modified my TA2 form to deduct it from my reimbursement. So no reminder was ever followed up from finance to Michelle about it. It was overlooked. I learned of this omission again when I met with Robert Majernik on July 12th, realized what he was presenting was correct, and immediately or promptly made payment. There's a $272.37 shortfall on a $4,095.62 reimbursement from the town of Flers, France, which is a 6.6% shortage. Now, whether that's due to some monetary exchange rate or some other reason, no one seems to know. Amy Wharton informs me that it's still being looked into. I would note to you that I combine this trip with the trip to the Netherlands. And if you look at my TA1 pre-approval for the trip to the Netherlands, it was projected that it would cost the city $2,895 for me to go to the Netherlands. But the actual expense was only $1,848.34 because Flers also reimbursed my ticket, or a good portion of it, even though the primary purpose of my trip really was to go to the Netherlands. So this saved the city $1,046.66. Finding 19-005, number 3. Fresh Start is a wonderful nonprofit serving our community. Sandy is on the board and has received absolutely no compensation of any kind. I did review and make recommendations on a number of community assistance applications, including Fresh Start. Those applications were ultimately approved by the City Council. Upon election, I believed that as long as there was no direct financial benefit to myself or my immediate family, that I had no conflict of interest. Since that time, we have been advised by legal counsel that unless the board position was one whereby you are an official representative of the city, that a potential conflict may exist. Henceforth, as I did at our recent July 16th City Council meeting, I recused myself from voting on contractual matters related to the International African American Museum as I serve on that board. So you may recall just recently on May 8th, 2019, we received an update from our legal department to all of council. In fact, we had an executive session this year where this matter was reviewed, because I think we've all been in a learning process as to the details of what constitutes a conflict of interest on boards that I serve on, that many of you serve on as well, when it comes to city approvals, both the community assistance grants, the accommodations funds that we often allocate to community organizations as well. Finding 19-005, number 4. Yes, I authorized Sandy Tecklenburg to drive on occasion while I worked. I made phone calls, I prepared for remarks to be made going to various events. I would note, not by way of criticism, that Mayor Riley often used a police officer for such driving service, and when I first became mayor, I followed that practice. I decided it would be a better use of a sworn officer to be in a more active duty service, and hence, by using my wife, who is a volunteer, have saved the city considerable dollars and the valuable use of a sworn officer in a more appropriate use. Mr. Majernik called me on Sunday, July 14th, to ask, this was the day before our prior audit committee meeting, to ask if I had ever signed a form for use of the vehicle. I replied no, and I was surprised when we had the meeting here that there were charges applicable for the take-home use of the vehicle. Honestly, since the day Chief Mullen provided me with a car, I just believed it was part of my 24/7 style mayor's service, and no one ever advised me otherwise. Upon gaining this information, I have paid the charge of $2,700 to the city and have decided for the time being, as noted in the other questions, answers, not to use the vehicle as a take-home vehicle at this time. Finding 19-005, number 5. Upon becoming mayor, former finance director Steve Bedard advised me of the $40,000 authorization limit that the mayor enjoys. The vendors in question all provided valuable services to the city of Charleston. Lewis Walton LLC initiated our online system to keep track of boards and commissions which previously had been done by hand, and the system, frankly, was out of date. Chernoff Newman proposed a strategic plan for digital economic development, many ideas from which have been implemented, including the hiring of a chief innovation officer for our city. The Gullah Society, as already mentioned, did an incredible and comprehensive program of community engagement, along with the reinterment of the Gilliard bones, which were in paid storage when I became mayor. I think some of you attended that reinterment ceremony. It was remarkable. As noted in the report, all were in compliance with the procurement ordinance adopted by City Council in February of 2013. Finding 19-005, number 6. Given the dynamic nature of my schedule, I was attempting to provide a real-time share of my schedule with Sandy. You would think with today's technology that this would not be a difficult thing. As it turned out, it was impossible. We tried a city laptop. It didn't work. I turned it promptly back in. If it had worked, I would have been happy to cover any appropriate expenses. Finding 19-005, number 7. In setting up our citizen service desk, our goal was to allow folks on all platforms to be able to communicate with the desk, be it by phone, email, text, Facebook, other social media. But cost of getting the desk up and running was a real consideration. Unfortunately, the first RFP did not properly take cost into account for this kind of service given the budget restraints. It's also evident that payment services and other extraneous services were given undue consideration. So we rebid the RFP and got a much more responsive price for the city, saving $205,550 over a 3-year contract period. That's a 286% savings. Findings 19-005, numbers 8 through 17. Mr. Majernik's comment for these items was that, quote, the mayor was likely not involved in specific details relating to the following findings. He was correct. I do not have a P card. I have not been involved in the specifics of how P cards are used. I did review with Michelle after the audit committee meeting. She provided me with a copy of a P card file review dated July the 19th of 2018, and I have a copy to be included in the report that said the appropriateness and legality of purchases, no illegal or inappropriate purchases were found, reconciliation of monthly statements, all statements were reconciled with receipts and signed off appropriately, dispute resolution, no instances of disputed items were found for this review period. That would have been the review period of early 2018, admittedly, but all I can say is the last time that we were properly reviewed for our P card usage in the department, we got a clean bill of health. I have asked Ms. Wharton to have staff meet again with Michelle and any folks in the mayor's office or executive department that use P cards to further review the procedures that are necessary for those. Observation number 19-005, number 1. Employees that were noted were Rick Giroux, Mike Wack, and Edward Jones. They're all excellent employees serving the city of Charleston. It's really an honor for me to work with them. Circumstances of their salary adjustments are noted, and similar to other employees throughout the city, I have a list 3 pages full of employees who had some audit of their position. They had a market analysis. They might have had a change of responsibilities. So many employees in our city have seen similar increases during the time that I was mayor. It was also noted, of course, that Mr. Jones, the reason was really a change in status from a temp to a part-time employee. Observation 19-005, number 2, Mr. McConnell ably served our city in the planning department and led the effort from a staff perspective to put the city's new enforceable short-term rental ordinance into place, a very critical policy improvement for our city over the last few years. He has recently taken a higher level planning position in the city of Chico, California. He made an excellent employee for our city. Robin Griffin left the city some time ago after helping us get started and working on a number of projects. Jack O'Toole remains with us and, in my view, does a remarkable job as the city's public information office. I'm honored to have them on our staff and to work with them. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity to review the findings of the audit. The executive department, I'm proud to work with all of my personal staff, and for that matter, all the city staff and all that they do for our citizens. I love this city. I love the opportunity to serve our city. I know y'all have questions that have been raised. I have provided answer to them, but in the interest of full disclosure and full transparency, I want to advise that I plan tomorrow to take the full report as completed and the full report of Mr. Berkstead, and submit those reports along with my responses to the South Carolina Ethics Commission for their review. And if there's some further question about any of these matters, it will be before them and they can opine on them. So thank you again for this opportunity, and I'm glad to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the record, I know you said that tomorrow you're going to submit all the matters to the Ethics Commission. Is there anything you'd like to submit to be added to the minutes and to the record of this meeting?
Well, I will add a written report that I've just mostly read, but added a few other remarks. And I would like to add the email from Ms. Baker from December 2015, the report on our P cards. I don't think I'll include the list of other employees who receive pay raises because there's personnel information there.
Very well. Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're going to turn to council. Unless there's any objection, we're going to continue in the plan that we made at the very beginning, which is to start with our most junior members and move to our most senior members with questioning. And I note that actually Councilmember Jackson and Councilmember Griffin were elected at the same time. So and Shealy. So in the interest of ladies first, we'll let Councilmember Jackson begin, and then we will go from there.
Thank you, but for the record, I am the oldest of the three, I think I'm going to be saving us time. I appreciate the hard work of Mr. Majernik and the council of Mr. Berkstead and the supplementary staff under Ms. Wharton's department and Ms. Herdina. I think this is a remarkable production of facts and details in a 2-month period. So I racked my brain thinking I needed to sound smart and have some, intelligent question to ask, but I think they've all been asked and answered. So
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Griffin.
A lot of questions. Just as full disclosure, I know this has been mentioned before, but after we agreed as a council to have an internal audit, I did a Freedom of Information Act on all email correspondence between Mayor Tecklenburg's 2 email addresses and his wife's email address, as well as his son Joseph's email address, and finally Roy Willie's email address. And I I did that because I wanted to see whether or not there were any improprieties that were discussed via email. I turned over a batch of emails to Mr. Majernik and the audit staff after, well, a few days prior to our last
Right.
audit meeting, and I have submitted another batch today, which I'm sure have not been reviewed yet.
Not yet.
Um,
Still working through those.
Right.
But
I guess my first question to you is, are you able to identify as an addendum to this report, who the P-card users who mislabeled the purchases as office supplies for the report, so that we know who they are?
so that would either be Michelle Hill or Robin Griffith. And Kristen Young as well, sorry.
So I guess my first question would be to the mayor, Mr. Mayor. Why would these three individuals think it's appropriate to label gifts as office supplies? Don't you think there's some deceit in mislabeling something as office supplies to the tune of almost $5,000?
I think this is questions for Mr. Majernik. You're free to answer if you want to. We will certainly have some open discussion probably going forward after this.
The report from July 19,
But that's not what the audit report said.
that's not what the audit report says. Apparently, I haven't queried deeply into the business, but apparently it wasn't just you, they were just using
This is my comment.
I think they were just using one general ledger number, whether they knew to distribute it to other general ledger numbers. I believe they were all legitimate expenses, they were just not classified.
Well, it can look, the perception there is that if you label it as office supplies and you're looking at an accounts payable report, you're not really going to think much of it. But if you realize that there's thousands of dollars that are misclassified as office supplies, it definitely looks like there's some deceit there. So I would think that we would look into that matter and find out why those individuals labeled that much money for gifts and other things to be taken on trips as office supplies. But are we going to, all these questions that I'm asking are really to be asked to the mayor. Am I allowed to do that, or?
So the setup that we had agreed on, would this be time to ask Mr. Majernik, and that we would then, when we got through that, entertain any motions, including another meeting, to discuss anything that's on council's mind? But I think the best thing to do for purposes of going around this table is let's go through Mr. Majernik, and then we will entertain any motions or suggestions from the council on how to proceed from there. If that suits you okay. I mean, I think we've got him here. This is his report. Let's get it all out on the table with any questions you've got.
Okay, well, then I'm just going to ask a couple more. All my questions really are directed towards the mayor. Mr. Majernik, do you feel like you had a fair, unbiased, easy time doing this audit, or can you just touch on some of the pressures just in the generality of this, because I think that would help as we discuss another item about maybe changing the procedure about how this is done. Maybe just some, doesn't have to be specifics, but just kind of summarize the difficulties of maybe, because I know this has been difficult.
So nobody would call this easy, auditing your boss.
No.
I mean, just what it is. I mean, you're auditing your boss, and that inherently comes with a level of difficulty. And every time that we had asked the mayor questions, and we had to do so throughout the audit because there are some things that we just could not find answers to. He never withheld any information. Same can be said for the staff. Anything that we had asked for, people provided, the fellow employees provided us everything that we had asked for.
Thank you. Just a few more kind of statements, I guess I'll make for now. And that is, well, I guess I can ask this to you. Did you feel like the mayor's answers just now about were truly public purposes?
That's in the eye of the beholder. I mean, no one person can come up with that answer. And I think that it would take the group of all 12 of you to come up with that true answer, because we all have our own opinions on what a public purpose would be. So I don't know if that would be going to a vote. But I think that that's not fair to put that in the hands of one person to say that about their superior.
The mayor had mentioned Dr. O and receiving business cards.
Correct.
And he also stated that one of his public purposes was that he was one of the champions of the internment of their remains. Isn't it also true, though, that the mayor's office gave a $25,000 procurement award to the Gullah Society to do that job?
Yes.
Without following
There was a
procurement?
$25,000 contract for the year to do that job.
Did they follow procurement procedure when they did that?
Not our internal policy, but they did follow the adopted council ordinance as it says in the report.
How do we have an internal rule, but also a council rule, and how can we differentiate between those two about what is right and wrong if we have two conflicting ordinances with how to have a procurement procedure?
Absolutely agree. I had no idea we had a council-approved procurement policy. No idea. Until we went through this procedure, and it was brought to my attention. The only procedure that I had seen was our internal policy, that is a violation of our internal policy.
That's it for me for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Shealy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank Mr. Majernik and everybody that spent so much time. I know it was, as you said, it's a tough process, and I just appreciate all the work that you've done. I just want to make sure we're clear on one thing, on the answer. The city did not pay out an additional $50,000 for this.
That is correct. So $32,000 of that is the salary for the staff that we would be paying one way or the other. So that it's not $50,000 additional.
Okay. And I think
And the estimate for the attorney would be maybe $20,000, $25,000. So that is additional.
All right. Thank you for clearing that up. I think there was a little bit of miscommunication in the media there on that one, but thank you for that. You sent us an email. It wasn't me, but one of our council members asked for an audit. Asked for billing invoices for Roy Willie's work when he was here. Obviously,
Yes.
I wasn't on council at the time. The last amount of work recorded by Roy Willie was on June 30th. If I read those invoices correctly.
That is the last we had paid him for.
That's the last we had paid him. So did he continue to work for the city beyond that and we just didn't pay him? Did he do it gratis? Why did we stop June 30th on paying if there was still work being done, or if there wasn't, then that certainly answers the question.
Right. Susan, are you? Given he is under the legal department, I'm not sure. So.
I'm looking at my file here, and the last invoice that we had from him was in 2017. Is that correct? Is in 2017.
Right, and the last time that he charged anything was June 30th, 2017, I believe.
April, correct. The last invoice that we have is April through June of 2017.
So did he not do any more work beyond that point?
Not that I'm aware of, or that he invoiced the legal department for. he didn't invoice the legal department after that time.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank Mr. Majernik. I appreciate all of your work, and Ms. Herdina too, and everybody else. I appreciate it. But you've done a great job of answering the questions, so I don't really have any more.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Councilmember Shade.
I'm glad to be recognized as a younger member of this council. Mr. Chairman, just as a matter of clarification, are we limiting our questions to just Mr. Majernik? Are they also available to council?
I'd like you to keep them to Mr. Majernik, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Mr. Majernik, have you read the report of the outside attorney, Mr. Michael Burchett?
Briefly.
Okay. Is there anything in that report you disagree with?
I'd have to read it closer to answer that.
Okay. Is it the parts that you have read?
I'm sorry?
The parts that you have read?
Nothing that I would disagree that I can recall.
Okay. The estimate that you gave on an internal audit, would that be consistent with what you would expect for an external auditor or audit firm to charge the city?
For this service, it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $40,000 if I had to guess.
For the work that you
For the internal audit, yes.
or just on the work that you did, but not on the work of others,
Not on the work of others.
including legal staff?
Correct.
Okay. On the expenditures that the mayor made within the $40,000 limit, even though we may have conflicting rules or policies, were those expenditures, to your opinion, valid?
It's a tough question. I mean, I don't feel comfortable giving the validity for one person of the decisions there.
Well, what is your understanding of the ability of the mayor to make expenditures under $40,000?
So my understanding was he would follow the same internal procedures that the rest of the city staff follow, where anything up to $2,500, there's no procurement. $2,500 to $5,000, you get written or phone quotes. $5,000 to $20,000, you get written quotes, and over $20,000 goes out to bid.
Okay, but there's
So
another.
that was before we learned of this other ordinance that had been adopted, that would be my understanding.
So the ordinance that was adopted,
And the ordinance that adopted says goods and services must follow that, but not outside, or goods and products follow that same threshold, but contracted services are not under that threshold.
so would the expenditures that he had fall within that definition of contract services?
Contract service.
That's all the questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Wagner.
More statements than questions here. Just general information, guys, more than anything else. At the ripe old age of 30, I became the senior auditor and internal audit at a little place called Polaris Missile Facility. Y'all might have heard of that place. We built killer rocket ships, and we're preparing to destroy the world if necessary, apparently. That was after several years in the military and maybe 5 years with a little company called Internal Revenue. So other than that, I was pretty well prepared for internal audit. Now, you think working for mayor's tough? Put a couple stars on these collars. This is, I understand your pain and the stress that you have to work under. You know, I mean, one, we could not make any mistakes in the business that we were in. I mean, none, zero zip. But in doing so, we didn't make a lot of friends either, because since we basically had zero tolerance across department heads, I mean, if I said it, the captain or the admiral would have it just like that. And usually I'd get a call like, hey, maybe you want to take a long lunch break today. Supply officer's got an axe and he's looking for you. I've had that said to me. But what I'm telling you here is this is a tough job. It's hard to do because you're dealing with folks that you see every day. I mean, literally every day. Mayor's report on the P cards, okay? There are thousands of transactions on P cards every month. I mean, okay, everybody's got one now. That was a big switch a few years ago. The only way you audit that is with a very low sample. Okay, I mean, the sample has to be strong enough where you have reasonable accuracy, but there's no way, the odds are not that great that he would pick the one that was referenced here. If it was on a pure P-card audit, it wouldn't happen, or unless he got really lucky one day.
Auditors usually pick that one that cannot be found.
Yeah. or the one that could not be found. Now that would be fun. But what I'm trying to get is kind of scope out what he's saying and doing here. And I really think we're probably going to do this one more time since there were 3 or 4 items that you didn't get to yet.
Right.
I mean, ultimately.
And we still have a stack of emails to get through as well.
Right. There were some pretty good mistakes here. I mean, I will tell you that. I actually had one of my clients, when I became my public guy, get Auditor 4 gifts that were miscoded on the tax return of all places and in his books as office supplies. So when I was hearing it, my ears perked up. And I really had them convinced that in reality, these were really office supplies. A couple days later, this IRS auditor comes bouncing back in the audit and he said, I think maybe you better look again. I mean, this guy's records were impeccable. And he showed me the receipts that he had found, and they were December 24th receipts. And I had no excuse for how we buy $2,000 or $3,000 worth of office supplies on Christmas Eve from J.C. Penney's. So, you know, I mean, what I'm trying to do is frame this a little bit and give you an idea how hard this guy had to work, predominantly. And we have to rely on legal and the ethics folks and to tell us if anything bad was, if you cross the line. You know, a lot of times people live in the gray area a lot, especially on personal stuff. Okay? I mean, you know, white, black, and everything else is a shade of gray. And as long as you stay out of the dark gray, you're probably okay. But, you know, it's hard to say where that breaking point is. Where is the line? And I don't see the line yet. There might be more to come out. Where that line, you know, you got your foot on it, or maybe got, you know, kind of slipped a little bit. But I honestly don't see it, guys. And, but I won't tell you it's not there either, because we don't have quite enough information yet. But we're getting there. So, again, you've got 3 or 4 more findings to look at and 3 or 4 more questions to ask for an answer. But I look forward to ending this. Really do. And whenever it's needed, I yield. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Moody.
Thank you, Chairman. I know I echo Robert, having been in your line of work for a while, I also appreciate your diligence and everything. It's been a while since I've been involved, and I know that you're familiar with what's called the fraud triangle. There's
Correct.
3 things: the rationalization, the opportunity, and the pressure. That we kind of look at to see whether or not there may be something going on in a situation. And kind of applying that same stuff to what I'm seeing here.
I just want to point out a few things that give me concern.
And I'll start with what the mayor said about filing with the Ethics Commission. And just pick one. Let's just pick the $1,000 birthday check. Now, he can ask the Ethics Commission, is that a violation of ethics? And maybe this ought to be addressed to the attorney. But if you don't tell the Ethics Commission that there were a series of emails leading up to that item from our CFO that said, there is not a business purpose and I'm not going to sign off on this check, and referring that to our legal department, and our legal department saying that's not an authorized or a specific expense for the city, and then they changed the invitation to add all of our names to it and said, now it's a city deal, and they're not going to add, that's not going to be sent to the ethics department, I don't believe. I mean, that's,
I doubt it.
in all due respect, sir, if that, all of that knowledge was out there, there would be a problem. Back to what Mr. Wagner just said. Do we have everything? I mean, we're getting bits and pieces here, and that's what's so concerning to me. And when I go back to that fraud triangle, that's why you have policies and procedures set up to kind of stop those opportunities. That's why you have a procurement policy that has several sets of eyes on the stuff, so that you don't allow one person to go. So you try to shut down all those opportunities. And so when you start breaking down those policies, and it's done at the very top, you've got driving personal automobiles, you got, from just looking at the salaries, there's some issues there. Look at these business cards. And the other part of that triangle is opportunity, correct? I mean, not opportunity, but
rationalization.
Rationalization. So you can rationalize about anything. We heard a great story here about rationalization to start off the mayor's comments. I know every one of those people. They're all great people. And I don't think the mayor is involved. I mean, I don't think he's a crook. I don't think he's unethical. I think he's just been exercising some bad judgment. And that's where this triangle comes in, and you have to shut those things down. So when you start rationalizing, for example, here's another one, just occurred to me a minute ago. When we said they rationalized that this was costing $52,000. That was their rationalization of what it is. But yet, on that birthday party, or one of those birthday parties, I think it was for Mr. Hamilton, Robin Griffin, who was a city employee, was getting all the responses.
That's correct.
So it shouldn't have been $1,000. It should have, if you're going to keep score like that, it should have been $1,000 plus her time and anybody else's time and staff time in doing that. So we just gave it $1,000. So my point is, when you start rationalizing all this stuff, it destroys your credibility. So I do think that the mayor was exercising bad judgment, but you didn't audit for bad judgment, I assume.
All I can do is present facts.
That's what, and I agree with that. But that's, to me, what we're talking about here is bad judgment. It's, I'll give you one more example that everybody in this room is familiar with, and it has to do with Judge Irv Condon and the loaning of that money. And the mayor rationalized that they had loaned it to themselves and they paid interest. Well, I can tell you as a business person, and you can't get anybody in the banking world that would tell you that they would make a loan, not just to that business, I'd put myself in. If I was in that business, I couldn't get a loan at that interest rate. That would be such a high-risk loan that the interest rate would probably start somewhere around 15% and go up on that kind of a loan. So there again, it was bad judgment. It really was a trust arrangement or a trust position that was violated, not illegally, not unethically, just bad judgment. And I think that's what we're dealing with here. And I mean, and I've got some specific questions for the mayor, but I wanted to ask a couple of things of you. On that list of public input, or what, could somebody help me with what it's called, where we make these grants for these different agencies.
Community assistance?
Community assistance,
Okay.
that's what I'm looking for. If you look at some of those, we evidently must have a policy that says that they have to be in good standing with the Secretary of State.
That's correct.
That must be our policy, right?
That is.
Okay, and we've got a whole bunch of numbers, and I suspect what that means is these people have not filed with the Secretary of State either their financial disclosure or their registration as a public charity. One of the two they haven't filed, and so therefore, they're not approved by the Secretary of State. Is that?
Typically, yeah, so you wouldn't be approved by the Secretary of State without going through the IRS regulations to be a nonprofit organization as a
Well, even if
charity.
you go through the IRS and you become a 501c something,
You would still have to be registered with the state as well.
Exactly.
Both, and those are both requirements, and we require.
and here we are, we're
To
making.
obtain community
we're making
assistance.
we're making grants to these community assistance people that we shouldn't even be making, and that's not just on the mayor, that's on all of us. We probably didn't look at it close enough. But again, he's the mayor, he's in charge. He should know that when he makes those decisions. Again, it's not illegal, it's not unethical, but it's bad judgment. And that's what we're dealing with here in spades. So that's all I have for you right now. Thank you again,
Thanks.
Mr.
Sir, could you just explain what you were talking about, the community assistance grants?
I could pull them up and show you. You go ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna go around.
I'll show them to Ms.
Get back to
Ms.
that.
Jackson.
That's not part of the audit.
I believe next on the hit parade is Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Councilman Seeking. Mr. Majernik, you've been asked this a couple of times about the 50,000, and you're so cordial in your response. But I wanted to be clear. Did the mayor or Jack O'Toole come to you to get the $50,000 figure that was put in the paper?
Nobody asked me for that number.
Okay. Did anybody come to
Or
you?
legal asked for the number, and I don't know where it went from there.
Okay. So
I'll
you gave that.
rephrase that.
You gave the 32,000 figure?
To our legal department.
Okay. Ms. Herdina, could you come up?
Well, I think, Mr. Dina, I think he just recognized that part of the reporting did go through the legal office. We'll allow questions to lawyers.
Are you now the lawyer for the mayor?
No, I think,
I just want to know.
we're going to rule this proper questioning. Thank you.
Ms. Herdina,
Yes.
why did you find out the 32,000 figure? Where did that query come from?
Well, it initiated from me. Initially, we were sitting around, we've had numerous meetings about this,
Okay.
and I was in Robert's office, and, I just said to him, because I know he has devoted all of his time to this over the last 2 months, and we were not able to work on a couple other matters that I thought we should be working on regarding some employees.
Okay.
And so I said to him very innocently, I said, how much time do you think you've spent on this matter? And he said to me, well, I've actually got that calculated, and it's $32,000.
Okay.
And so at that point then, and again, I was thinking how we calculate our time for purposes of FOIAs,
Right.
not necessarily internal audit. We always think about how much time employees have spent because we can charge for it. So I had that number, and I was talking to Jack O'Toole, and I don't remember if he asked me, frankly, or I told him. He said, how much do you think we've spent on the audit? And I said, well, Robert's told me his time and his staff time was $32,000, and I estimate that the attorney's time is going to be about $20,000. That's how it came about.
So that's how that talking point came out in the newspaper, being a cost of $50,000, if you surmise in that.
Yes, I didn't talk to the press.
Okay. I know you didn't. I know. I just wondered how did that number get from Mr.
Yeah.
Majernik, and now obviously to you,
Right.
to the mayor and his
And again,
information people.
Just so you understand, whenever, we are always trying to figure out ways to value our
I
time
understand.
and ask for reimbursement of our time if at all possible. And it came up very innocently.
I
And
understand.
Robert, knowing how precise he is with everything, had the figure right there.
Ms. Wharton, will you come up? No, I want to know because it seems like double expensing to me. We're paying Mr. Majernik anyway, okay? What has been the additional appropriations of $50,000 or $52,000 that council have made to pay for Mr. Majernik and I guess the legal amount?
We just pay him every 2 weeks, like we pay every.
Has there been any additional money?
No.
Additional expense for Mr. Majernik and his team as a result of council and the mayor requesting this audit?
No.
So would you agree that that information that was put in the paper is inaccurate?
For additional expense, yes, there was for his time.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Because that number has been run out there now, it's a running total of $52,000. Thank you, Ms. Wharton. You go back and sit down. Thank you. Now, Mr. Majernik, when we voted for this audit, we voted for you and your team to get engaged. The expense for the attorney, the outside attorney, in which I certainly has appreciated his opinion, was not a vote of council. That was a decision. It was not a vote of council. Who made the decision for that expense?
That was made by the legal counsel.
Separate from council?
Separate from council.
Okay. That's all. I don't need you to talk. I appreciate you making that decision, but it's thrown out as though council made that decision. We had no input on whether to say we're going to hire an outside attorney or not. Did we have any input on that?
No, sir, but let me explain that rationale.
I understand the rationale. What I'm trying to break down is that this $50,000 or now $52,000 figure is an illegitimate number. It is not accurate. Because if we're going to pay Mr. Majernik anyway, his time has to be accounted doing something. Okay? Even if we asked him to count beans, we would have to pay Mr. Majernik. So for that figure to be thrown out as though it's costing the city taxpayers, because that's the inference, it cost the city taxpayers another $32,500 and some odd dollars to date on Mr. Majernik's time. It hadn't cost the taxpayers additional money, has it? Not for Mr. Majernik. That's not a hard question to answer.
It's how you value his services. No, we're not paying anything extra for him to perform this audit. That's
Okay,
correct.
that's right. So for the news media, I would hope they would get that portion right, Mr. Chairman. The second thing, thank you. When it comes to, I agree with you, Mr. Majernik, we need to clear up the conflict between our procurement policy and whatever ordinance council passed, because frankly, that can be taken advantage of. And I see the perplexing position it could put you in. Our procurement policy, and you just stated it, has a lower threshold to have additional input.
Correct.
And apparently, the ordinance that was passed, and I think that ordinance was passed really to help our capital projects. But we need to straighten that out. I mean, I think sooner rather than later.
Correct.
Okay. The second thing I know you can't, the third thing I know you can't answer, but you can answer this part. Is this audit over with in your opinion?
Not yet.
Okay, thank you. Because I really do want to get to the bottom of how and what. I think the figure I was told is $85,000 was paid to Mr. Willie. And when we saw the spreadsheet up there at the draft, it showed $1,600+ for...
That was solely for city bot.
Solely for city bot.
Correct.
I understand that. But that was broken up. But the detail on the additional amounts, and I know I'm not the only one on council, are very interested to see the
Yes.
categories that he was paid for.
We can provide that.
Okay, thank you. Now, the mayor brought something up that I commend him for. If he saved $205,550 on the technology contract that was bidded out, that's great. And I'll tell you, we should have found that out before now. But that same effort did not take place, and this is a question that I guess I'll throw it out now, and I'll certainly send it to you in writing after this. When we did the procurement process for the RFQ for the planner to come in and plan for West Ashley revitalization, our procurement process was preempted. Understanding that I had, and the company that finished number 1 was about 150,000 or so higher than the company that finished number 2, 3, and 4. I happen to serve on that procurement process. My understanding is that you negotiate with number 1. This came from Mr. Cooper, our procurement officer. You negotiate in earnest with number 1. Failing that, because we had budgeted $350 for that service, you go to number 2. And the mayor preempted that with his chief of staff at the time, stepped in. Mr. Cooper was set aside, and Mr. Martin at that time negotiated, I think, I don't know, $7,000 or $10,000 difference. That process is the next thing I want you to look into when you come back and report the next time, okay? How do we get from, I don't need to answer now.
That contract or for this contract where the city bought?
Not city bought.
Okay.
I'm past
We're on the
city bought.
West
I'm
Coast.
talking about
Okay.
the Dover Coal process, okay? Where a company was virtually 50% higher. And the same thing that was done because the previous company was too high under the city bought situation. The complete opposite was done with Dover Coal. Instead of negotiating and going to the second company that was at budget, or maybe a tad below budget, we opted for the higher expense to the taxpayer. So if you could give us a review on the unfolding of how that occurred and who told Mr. Cooper to step aside and put Mr. Martin in charge, I'd certainly like to see how we get to the bottom of that, because it's admirable on the city bot process and saving the city money. So that portion I would like, if you could do that portion. And I think when we get to the bottom down here, and I do appreciate the pressure that you were under doing this. Okay, it is not, and Councilman Wagner is spot on when he says it's not an easy job to have to question your boss. I agree with that. But I hope that when we get down to the reporting item number 4 on this agenda, that we will correct that, because it's unfair for you to have to be in that vice, if you will. And I do thank you for your service to this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I think because Councilmember Mitchell had a moment of lucidity and left City Council for and came back, I do believe in the pecking order. He is next.
Councilmember Gregory.
And then Councilmember Gregory.
Gregory is next.
All right, well, we're going to give you the seniority points from when you, Councilmember Gregory, on a technicality.
Being an old government bureaucrat, some of what I've observed in this report does give me pause, because as a manager, if this kind of information was presented to me regarding an employee, at a minimum, there would be a reprimand, and in some cases, removal. Now, I clearly understand that the mayor, our elected officials, are not subject to the same rules and regulations as employees do. But I wanted to just make that very clear, that as a manager, and I'm sure as the manager of the city, if the mayor was presented with some of what we have here, he would have no recourse but to reprimand, and in some cases, removal. I do think that much of what we're seeing has to do with bad judgment, but bad judgment still does not excuse it, particularly if the mayor was under the same rules and regulations as other employees. Because employees make bad judgment also, but they still have to pay the cost for that bad judgment. So I just wanted that to be the preamble of what I'm about to say. I also think that the $50,000 strategy, and that's what I call it, was just simply to make it appear as though this city council is frivolously spending taxpayers' dollars. And I really resented the Post and Courier's assessment and strategy to do that. I think it was wrong, particularly since we had not had a chance to review the report and make our recommendations accordingly. That article, which was written, clearly makes it appear as though the audit is complete. City Council has wasted money again, quote unquote, and I really resent that in the Post and Courier, placing us in what I consider very, very, very bad position. I have a couple of questions. My first question has to do with our First Lady. And the question is, why shouldn't we pay for travel for the First Lady when she accompanies the mayor? Are there other instances in other cities where that in fact is occurring?
We haven't looked into other cities.
I think we may want to do that, because I do think that sometimes it is appropriate for the First Lady to accompany the mayor in certain situations. And I think at some point, even if that's not the case, I think that we should start looking into that. My issue, though, has more to do with our competitive programs, our community outreach program and our accommodations program. I have ran multi-million-dollar grant programs, all of which are competitive. When there is a recommendation from the review committee, okay, if I changed it, I could lose my job. Okay, as a government, I'm talking government employee, I could lose my job, okay? I do think that we need to fix that. I think we need to put some procedures in place similar to what we have with the ATAX. At least, of course, the mayor has input, and he should, okay? Because the ultimate decision and recommendation comes from him. I have experience, however, recommendations for changing numbers to go up or down for the ATAX. However, at least you have a committee or a body that would discuss that and even say yay to nay with regard to the mayor's recommendation. The community assistance program does not have that kind of buffer. And I do think that we need to at least consider putting in place something similar to what we have with the ATAX. Because then I think it protects the integrity of the program, and I also think it protects the mayor in terms of making it appear as though, okay, that the numbers are being changed. And right now, from what I've read, we're saying for the community assistance program, as long as a family member or the mayor is not a part of the board, okay, then it's okay. I'm saying it's not okay. I'm saying it's not okay because those are not the only programs, okay, that the mayor necessarily would make adjustments to. So in order to protect the integrity of a competitive program where people compete for funds, I do think that we need another level for the community outreach program, similar to what we do for the ATAX program, okay? Because I think that gives the programs a little more integrity and less of ability to be scrutinized in such a way that calls into question the mayor. I agree. I don't think the mayor's a crook. I don't think the mayor is dishonest. I do think, however, there has been some bad judgment here. But for me, it's the competitive programs that we need to make sure we protect the integrity of those programs. And it does not give the appearance of being a program that is really for the mayor, and I'm saying appearance, okay, to do special favors. Okay? And finally, I appreciate you, but I don't envy you. I'm serious. You, our corporate counsel, our CFO have been placed in an unfair position. There's no way that we're going to ask a question here and you are going to say anything negative about your boss. You're not. You can't. You got children to feed. I'm being very, very sincere here. If I had my druthers, I would throw this entire audit out and start from scratch and then pay somebody, okay, if it's $50,000, for it to be totally independent and that staff not be placed in a conflicting position. Because I think it was wrong, okay, and unfortunately I've been a part of the wrong, and I apologize to you for that, because we should have never ever placed you guys in this position. And I just think that we should continue, but let's just protect these competitive programs. We've not been challenged yet.
I do want to make one comment to that we do have an internal staff committee, just like we have on the ATAX for community assistance. It's not made up of external people. Like the ATAX has some members of the outside community as well, where the community assistance is all internal, but there is still a review committee.
No, I'm not saying.
Okay.
No.
I just want to clarify that there is
I'm
still a
not saying
review
that.
committee.
I don't want for the record to be clear. I'm not saying that the mayor just grabs these documents
Right.
and say X, Y, Z. No.
Right.
Okay, I understand that there's an internal
Okay.
committee.
I just want to make sure that's clear, because it sounded
but
like
I'm
it
saying
was.
I'm saying, but in addition to the internal committee, okay, we also need an external committee, which is made up of a variety of people in the community to make the final decisions, just as we do for ATAX. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I think it gives that program more credibility, and it does not give our mayor or any mayor, okay, the appearance of impropriety.
Right.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Mitchell. I think it's Mitchell, then Councilmember White, then Councilmember Lewis. Yep.
Yeah?
So Mitchell, White before, should have been White and Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm right behind
I
Councilman.
got you. All right, we'll go to Councilmember. I thought Councilmember White.
Should be White.
Thank you. Ms. Herdina, can I ask a question of you?
Councilmember, is your mic
Yeah, let me bring it a little forward.
closer?
Can you hear me now? All right. Ms. Herdina, can I ask a question of you? And I guess I should have started off in a quick question. Mr. Majernik, the emails that were provided via the FOIA that Councilmember Griffin mentioned, have you reviewed those?
Not entirely. So we have not had the ability to put an opinion out on those yet.
Okay. And there were two sets, I understand.
One just came in this morning.
And
Yes.
so,
And we certainly haven't had a time to look at anything that came in this morning.
right. And I don't, quite frankly, know, I was forwarded some information. I have no idea if I've got set 1, set 2, set 3. What I do know is, for whatever reason in this process, it seems like things have sort of come in dribs and drabs.
Agree.
And I don't know if it's because we keep finding more stuff and it's causing us more question. or that's been purposeful. I just don't know. But I do know that every time I think I've come to a conclusion on something, then I find that I get another email with a stack full of stuff that causes me more consternation. I got 100.
And I will say that's how it comes to me as well. I mean,
Fair
little
enough.
pieces.
And I'm not passing judgment or blame on anyone, by the way. I'm just saying that's certainly
Right.
the impression.
It definitely comes in pieces to me as well.
that
So
I've
we're
had.
absorbing as we get it, as much as we can.
Of the 180-something emails that I got just today, of which I have certainly not had an opportunity to review either, and I don't know if this was round 2 or what. But I quickly flipped through them, and again, not thoroughly, but just flipped through them just to see if, in fact, there was anything that jumped out at me. And I want to read from 2 emails out of the 180. And again, this is not in totality. There's certainly more stuff in here I haven't had time to review. This email in particular, both of them are emails between the mayor and his campaign manager. In August 4th of 2016, the email states, and this was an email of a letter associated with getting campaign contributions. By the way, these are on city email accounts with the mayor's name and title. So these did go, in fact, through the city's email server. Thank you for your generous contribution to help me close out my final stages in my campaign debt. We were successful in retiring my campaign debt and ended up with small surplus that includes your contribution, so your contribution will be applied to your 2019 re-election campaign. It goes on from there. Next email was a group of emails that started this was in February of 2018. It was between the mayor's campaign manager, a donor, and the mayor. It started out with this: Mr. Mayor, you really need to get a way to receive online campaign contributions. Take my word for it, that will vastly enhance your income, so on and so forth. That email then was forwarded on to the mayor's campaign manager, that subsequently responded, okay, we'll discuss and add this to the list on our meetings on Thursday. The mayor then responded to him also, and I'm not going to mention the person's name. This person said, we need to get such and such person needs to know where they need to send checks. And I spoke with her last week, and she asked if she would, if we had gotten a list of her potential donors from a particular group that was mentioned in here. And it goes on to say, okay, no problem. I will send an email to this person this morning with that info. Ms. Herdina, is that an ethics violation? Is that an ethics violation?
I am not the one to give an opinion on an ethics violation. That's for the commission to decide, and I would recommend, the mayor's offered to submit this, and if you've got a question to submit to the commission, I would do that. Councilmember, can I just mention one thing about the FOIAs? And I think there's a suggestion that there's been dribs and drabs or whatever, and if I could just take a moment to explain that process, because it's been quite overwhelming in a respect for us. So we did receive Councilmember Griffin's requests, and they were for all the emails between the mayor and Mrs. Tecklenburg, both ways, as well as emails between the mayor and his son Joseph, as well as the mayor and Roy Willie. And we had difficulties getting the documents reproduced off of our IT system. They were delivered in a data form, and so it took quite a while to get those documents converted from a data form to a PDF. And then, as we did with every FOIA, once we converted them to PDF, we then downloaded them and got them copied and reviewed them and then produced them. The first production of the documents was, I think it was July 3rd, I believe, right before the 4th of July weekend. And there were probably about somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 pages of documents that were produced in that production. And then there was the second set. Again, we had the same difficulties with our IT department. Just again, we had some difficulties converting them to a readable form, and so it took some time. And then we ultimately produced the rest of the documents to Councilmember Griffin Tuesday afternoon, I think it was, late. And he's been very patient with us in understanding. And I would say there were maybe another 1,000 pages produced at that point in time. So I just want to make clear for the record that the legal department has tried to produce these as quickly as we could, and they were quite voluminous. And so that is what has taken some time to get these documents to Councilmember Griffin. We've got copies of them, and we'll certainly make them available to any other council person who would like to see them.
So let me, so notwithstanding the fact that you don't want to present an opinion on that particular situation, let me ask the question maybe in a different way. Is it against the Ethics Act to use government resources to raise campaign contribution funds?
I guess I'll defer to Michael on that, who's our ethics, if you want to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, he's here, we're paying for him. Come on up, Michael.
I'm going to let limited questioning on this one, but he is here and we are paying for him. I think that's a valid point. Very limited questions.
You might answer it.
Let's let this question go, then we'll turn to you. Recognizing, by the way, we are clearly going to be coming back for round 3 of this, okay? Just so, and we are into hour 2 of round 2. Anyway, the question is under the facts presented, is that an ethics violation?
Well, as Ms. Ordina said, only the Ethics Commission in this circumstance can really decide that. There are several provisions of the Ethics Act that do deal with use of public resources to for campaign purposes or election-related purposes. It's not always clear-cut, what's use of those resources. I mean, is receiving an email, are you using the resources? I mean, what is the intention with the email? I mean,
Sending an email from your city your account to your campaign manager specifically regarding raising campaign contribution funds.
Well, I mean, it could be seen as an ethics violation, and I'm not trying to be cute about it, but it really just may depend on the judgment call of the individual commissioners. I mean, there's a process where there's an intake process at the Ethics Commission when a complaint comes in the door. Probably the complaint that might come in the door soon is going to at least get through that intake process, and then it is through the investigation that the investigators really figure out what they think happened. Commission staff makes a recommendation to the commissioners, and I don't really want to get in the head of what one commissioner thinks is a use of resources, which might be a different situation with another commissioner. You also have strange things in the Ethics Act, like maybe probable cause is there, but there's something called a waiver of further proceedings, where the commission can exercise its discretion, even if they think probable cause is there, to have some kind of resolution that's short of a violation. So there's a lot of things that can happen in that process, and a lot of it is just within the judgment call of the individual commissioners with a lot of reliance on staff. So use of resources, there can be differing interpretations on that. There could be certain, certain kind of exceptions for incidental use. And, I would just say, Councilman, it's a possibility, but I mean, none of us in this room can make that judgment call, in my opinion. There's a process for that.
We're at Councilmember White's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Let me, with a show of hands of my colleagues on council, does anyone have any question in their mind that they should be using their city email address or in City Hall raising money for their campaigns? Is there any question? Does anyone think?
I'll tell you what I was told 4 years ago.
Let's go through the questions and we'll let
I'll
council.
tell you what I was told 4 years ago. I accidentally used one of my letterheads to send out for some campaign contribution, and I was told was a violation of the Ethics Act. So I would suggest that you send some of this information to the Ethics Commission and let them give you their opinion on it. That's what I would do.
All right.
And I would say it's...
We're going to continue with Councilmember White's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That's fine for now. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Majernik, this is a stack of supporting documents that you had provided to me.
Yes.
I appreciate that. And I want to just, if I could, quickly read two things. And again, this is 803 pages of supporting
It's a lot of
documents.
information.
Does everybody have this?
I don't believe that was sent to everybody. I'm happy to send it to anyone that would like it, though.
I would highly recommend that not only council has this, but it should have been made as part of an appendices to the report, because there's some fairly important things in here.
Can I make one point before we go forward? I don't think we have a final report yet, so that's part of what we're doing.
That's
here with
fair
council.
enough.
So,
Great. Well, then I think moving forward, let's make sure it gets added.
And we can...
But I think it needs to be made public now. I have not reviewed it all. It's a tremendous amount of information. I just got it, 2 days ago?
Right.
But I want to make a couple of quotes from what I did quickly find in my review. This is a memo dated February 6, 2018 from our CFO. And I'm going to just kind of cut just the important parts out. I had advised that this should not be something that the city contributes to, as it is a party held specifically to celebrate one individual and his birthday, does not benefit a nonprofit or any initiative, and was not budgeted previously. I am still uncomfortable with spending city funds for this expense. I will not sign off on this invoice. Please use Mayor Tecklenburg's signature as approval to pay. That's from the CFO, specifically about the private birthday party where the mayor was told specifically that it was not an appropriate use of city funds. And I will go one step further to say that that the city attorney also weighed in on that and shared with the mayor's staff that it was not appropriate. This is another email that was an email chain of a group of emails that came that was specific to an issue that was raised about a laptop or use of city laptop. And this is between the telecommunications service coordinator, telecommunications manager, and our director of IT. And I'll try to go through this fairly quickly. As of April 18, 2016, the question was raised about getting access to a calendar. And so this individual said, "Thank you. As instructed, I have activated the mobile broadband for Ms. Tecklenburg city-issued laptop. However, with that having been said, please note that in my opinion, this is not an appropriate use of city funds." Then the telecommunications manager, in fact, responded as such. "Agreed, the security risks alone are not worth the risk in my opinion. I believe West pushed back on this as well, but ultimately lost the battle. At the very least, I disagree with the monthly expenses we are going to incur. However, West has asked us to handle the activation. Thank you for your diligence and professional approach to our roles regarding city funds and our responsibility to maintain the best financial position possible." That email was subsequently then sent to Wes as information. So, Mr. Majernik, as everybody said here, we appreciate all your professionalism and diligence. This has clearly not been an easy process for you, I recognize that, but I do thank you for your time. As I stated, in front of me is 803 pages of emails and supporting documents that were provided to me by the auditor. I'm not sure why they were not included in the appendix, but I think moving forward it sounds like they will certainly be. The first finding with the city CFO specifically states that the mayor was told an expense that he wanted to pay for was in fact not a legitimate expense, and so much so that our CFO refused to approve the expenditure. It was then subsequently said by our city attorney the same thing. And so that one in and of itself was cause for pause. But the second item that I found within this packet with the IT, as I read to you, certainly compromised the cybersecurity and related city and federal policies that we have. But aside from all the irrefutable and numerous findings from the procurement violations, ethics violations, misuse of city funds, the overwhelming evidence in this audit, the outcome unmistakably points to one clear and disturbing key thing to me, and that is we have poor leadership coupled with poor judgment at the top of City Hall. The outside legal counsel stated it was likely the mayor, because he is elected, is not held to the same policies as our employees. And in that regard, it does not mean that the mayor is excused from policy violations. It does mean that, in fact, as an elected official, he must be held to an even higher standard. And let us be clear, the outside legal counsel did not exonerate the mayor for his violations, ethics or otherwise, nor for the misuse of funds. We've all heard a quote before, and that is that when a leader fails to lead himself, a leader who lacks character or integrity will never endure the test of time. It does not matter how intelligent, affable, persuasive, or savvy a person is. If they are prone to rationalizing unethical behavior based on past, current, or future needs, they will eventually fall prey to their own undoings. Optics over ethics are never a formula for success. Honesty and integrity are tremendously important to me. Understanding my responsibilities to citizens of the City of Charleston, and I must continue to hold myself an exceptionally high standard, and I expect that everyone around me does the same exact thing. Honesty and integrity are not hard. You simply have to tell the truth, always, and always be willing to do the right thing despite the outcome. Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether you've broken the law. I don't know. That's not for me to decide, and that's not for my opinion in this situation. That's up to the Ethics Commission and the courts to decide. But what I do know is that you have broken the trust of the citizens of Charleston, and that's intolerable and completely unacceptable. Although the Post-Courier has attempted to characterize this audit as being politically motivated witch hunt, which is because it's in an election year, please make no mistake, Mr. Mayor, if this body became knowledgeable of the blatant wrongdoings, which was, as discovered, date back all the way to the first year in office, be assured we would have taken action well before now. The citizens of Charleston absolutely deserve better. Over my nearly 2 decades in the banking industry, I have been involved in many embezzlement cases. And in every case, the perpetrator always starts out small. They test the system if they can see if they can get caught. Maybe it starts with $10. Something then goes unnoticed and it goes to $1,000. And before you know it, it goes to $100,000. Unfortunately, catching someone who is embezzling early on at its best is a difficult task, but rest assured, it will always rear its ugly head. And that is exactly what this audit has proven. The audit revealed once again unethical behavior and pointed out very, very poor judgment, which is absent of leadership the citizens of Charleston expect. And when you calculate all the dollar amounts identified in this audit that are either unethical, inappropriate, or show bad judgment, it totals over $280,000. And that was what Mr. Majernik found in 60 days and in one department. And equally disconcerting is the superficial response that this audit has received from some members of the press and the lack of factual or researched information. When have we become so forgiving of political excuses and municipal manipulation, and so ignorant of the facts before allowing erroneous information to be fed to the public? Some in the press wish to lead their readers to believe that this audit is a collection of non-issues. Again, it is undeniably not the case. It's an awful and disgraceful pattern of an entitled behavior. In corporate America, any one of these transgressions could be grounds for immediate termination, as Councilmember Gregory pointed out. And as an example, state employees could be terminated and possibly arrested for diverting the use of P-card expenses for lesser amounts of money. And to further the pattern of intentional deceit, when do we as citizens send private citizens to Europe on city taxpayers' dollars? Those individuals who did benefit from those city-paid tickets actually did pay back 3/4 of the tickets expenses back to the city, but only when the audit was announced. The old hand got caught in the cookie jar, per se. Additionally, has anyone even questioned how much of these expenses were covered other than the airfare for these taxpayers and citizens to go to France? Indiscriminately using public funds for parties, entertaining, subsidizing your spouse's special interest group speaks volume again about really poor judgment and demonstrates not only a lack of leadership, but cements the fact that there are no boundaries or limits to this unacceptable behavior. And well before this audit began, establishing this pattern of poor judgment and lack of leadership, as Councilmember Moody brought up, with Judge Condon's findings back in May of 2018 for the self-dealing and the transactions with Mrs. Weinglass's estate. A 95-year-old retired school teacher who the mayor was entrusted to administer and unfortunately found that borrowing money from Ms. Weinglass's trust was not appropriate and was removed as trustee. Very well, the mayor said it was ignorance, he didn't understand, but understand that never ever is ignorance excuse for the law. To the citizens of Charleston, even to have shared what I have shared with you is extremely uncomfortable and on so many levels. However, this is a wake-up call for our city. It is up to us and all the 12 districts at this great city that we decide whether we allow City Hall to continue to operate and compromise the required standards of ethical, responsible judgment, behavior, and moral leadership. As a strong mayor form of government, the mayor does have significant latitude in how he operates the city. And when a strong mayor who has the highest ethical, moral standards, our city can operate very efficiently. But when you have a mayor who lacks the moral compass required of someone in such a position, we ultimately find ourselves in a position that we are today. This audit is certainly not over. We have more work to do. We have to be in a position where we even sit in this council chambers and go through this exercise. In the 12 years I've been on city council, I've never seen anything like it. And what I have seen is that over and over again, we are seeing a pattern of bad judgment, and now it's going further on to finding where we're seeing, in my personal opinion, what we will find are ethics violations that are blatant and unwarranted. So I'm sad to say that we were in this position. I'm sad to, Mr. Majernik, you were put in this position. I recognize this is not over by any stretch of imagination, and it's a sad day in Charleston that we have to be here.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, sir.
You are next. We've been trying to get to you for a while. We finally did. Welcome.
I really don't have that much to say. I misapplaud of all this going on, and the thing is that I think it's just that the mayor himself made some bad judgment on some calls and some things he did. That's just my personal feelings. Knowing him as I did and as I do, and I just think that everybody makes mistakes someday down the line. So we call this committee together, this audit committee, to see if things are going wrong, that we can straighten out. I think that's what it's all about, getting it straightening out that we have something that's going wrong. I think we can sit here and sit here and sit here, and people are looking at us like we're a bunch of dumb people anyway. But the thing is that if something is done wrong, we should be able to straighten it out here from the city council. That's what we're here for. So if a mistake was being made, then let's rectify this mistake and fix those mistakes. But don't sit up here, we're going to sit up here and call a person this or call a person that, because there's no one in this world have not made a mistake in their life. And that's just the way I feel. This is just me talking. And, you know, I spoke to the mayor, and I told him as such. Some things are over with when it comes to a certain point that was brought out a few minutes ago. But as we here as council, as elected officials, and if something is going wrong, we had the audit committee done because this is what we wanted. So if there's something that have done wrong for bad judgment, which we make some bad judgment ourselves in voting here ourselves, then we have to come back and straighten it out. Then let's straighten it out that even the mayor have done. He might have made some mistakes himself too, on a lot of occasions. Not knowing, but we said he should know, like some things here I should know that I don't know. But there's a song, like I told the mayor, that when I was living in New York, my cousin had a huge gospel group. They traveled from Philadelphia, Connecticut, all around the state. And the songs go as some words in the song I'm going to sing. I'm not going to be singing these songs tonight. But be careful, very careful of the stone that you throw. He said, tongue can accuse and carry bad news. Gossip is cheap, you know. But if you have never made a mistake in your life, please be careful of the stone that you throw. So now we are here to hear what's going on and make decisions to clean up anything that's wrong. So that's what we're here to do. So if something is wrong, let's get together, listen to the audit report, and if something is done wrong, let's clean it up and get it squared away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Mitchell. I believe last on the hit parade. We're going to get through Councilmember Lewis, and then we will.
And you didn't even get a chance.
I'm going to say something, Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly want to thank the staff for the work that they have done also of putting these audits together, sitting through these meetings that we have had. I know it's not easy. It's a few things. Community assistance programs that we need to look at. We got an agenda committee. I think that needs to put on the agenda, sent to the agenda committee, that we need to look at the community assistance program. And if we need to change the ordinance the way we do it, we need to do it. Our procurement policy, we have an agenda committee. This needs to be sent to the agenda committee, that if we need to make some changes to our procurement policy, we need to make those changes. Those lie with 12 members of City Council and the mayor. Ethics violation. If there anyone feel that they got some ethics violation, if some I probably heard a while ago, put it together, send it to the Ethics Commission. We can't deal with ethics violations. That's the responsibility of the South Carolina State Ethics Commission. Send it to them. Let them look at it. But I think there was a lot of time wasted on some things that we could do ourselves as council members through our ordinances. So that's what we need to do. And hopefully our next meeting will be half as long as this one is. Thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to ask a couple of questions of Mr. Majernik, just for purposes of scheduling and practicality and getting this audit finished. And I just was asking him, so in order to get done, does August 15th give you enough time to take in all the information you received and put something back together so we can get a final internal auditor's report?
15 should be sufficient.
All right, so can you get it before the 15th so we can schedule a meeting for the 15th, or is?
Yes.
So my suggestion is, because it's clear there's still some more work to do, that to the extent this committee is agreeable, that we reschedule what will be the third and final in a series for this audit for the 15th of August at 3 o'clock, which is a Thursday. If everyone can quickly take a look at their schedules. If people are out of town, we'll work through that. And I see Councilmember Lewis already raising his hand.
I'll tell you right now, human resource, traffic and transportation, got several committees, and we got some work that has to be done. We have to pick a new group for the parking garages. All that stuff, 7, 8, 9 books we got to go through. I'm serving on three different, besides my regular committees that I'm serving on, to serve on these procurement. So I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to be ready by the 15th of August. Because everything that they want to do is from August the 3rd to August the 8th. And that's a lot. When you got a family to run, you got a church, business to take care, you got neighborhoods to take care of. I'm not going to bog myself down. I may be here at the next meeting, I may not.
All right, having taken that into consideration, any other comments on just timing for all this so we can schedule at least getting this thing closed? Councilmember Moody.
I just got one question for the lawyer and one for our auditor. Robert, since you're up there, I know that immediately after this was discussed and we asked you to do this audit, the newspaper was there, I think, in the office at City Hall the next day, looking at the expense reports of all of the 12 of us. The fact that there hadn't been a story tells me there's probably not any news there. But I want to specifically ask you, have you looked at our expense reports to be sure that we're in compliance? And if you have, what were those findings?
Have not yet, but that's on the list. And that's on the question you had provided, so we have not completed that portion.
And Mike, as far as the ethics filing is concerned, I know there at one point was kind of a self-reporting of an ethics violation by one of our council members several years ago. And the ethics committee or commission basically refused to rule on that because they didn't deal with self-reporting. And so I raised that question because the mayor has said that he wants to report, and I would be glad if, if he did it, but if it doesn't, do we need to do something else to
No, sir. I mean, I believe I might be familiar with the situation you're referring to. And if it's the one I'm recalling, there was a question that arose about a council member's conduct, but there wasn't a formal complaint that was filed. So the commission's refusal to address that may have just been through an initial evaluation that it just really didn't fall under the jurisdiction of the Ethics Commission.
That's really my question. If we're doing it again, should we expect a different results? I mean, are we... because if the mayor files a request and says, I want you to rule on whether or not this is ethical, I mean, that was exactly what this individual did, if I'm not mistaken. And they said, no, we're not going to rule on that.
Well, I mean, there wasn't a complaint there, and here it looks like the mayor, it can come in different forms. I mean, anybody on council, the council itself, anybody out in the public can actually file a complaint. If the mayor is providing information to the commission, then the commission itself, and he's not filing a complaint on himself, the commission can take that information, do an initial review, and the commission itself can vote to file a complaint. Now, as I try not to make the hard calls here because, I mean, I think everybody's entitled to presumption of innocence. I mean, even if it's an administrative issue, as opposed to something more serious. But I will say that I do have confidence that if the commission sees this information, then it is sufficient to open an investigation. But if anybody has any concerns about that, they can file a complaint themselves.
If I can just follow up on what
Very few questions, and we'll move on to the next agenda item.
So
Councilmember Griffin has his hand up, Councilmember Shea, Councilmember Gregory, then we're going to move on to the next agenda item.
I've got a couple questions for the auditor. So if you want to go ahead.
While you're standing, and this is sort of what Councilmember Moody had alluded to a few moments ago, and in addition to what Councilmember Lewis and Councilmember Mitchell mentioned earlier. Once this information is forwarded to the Ethics Commission, they have this information, they have the ability to investigate, to look into other information that is made available to them.
Correct.
So whoever wants to send something up, they have the ability to send something up. If they want to write a letter and forward emails, documents, whatever, nothing's stopping anybody from doing that.
Correct.
And even if no one volunteers any information, the commission itself has the investigative tools to look into and further whatever information they receive initially.
Yes, sir, and they will investigate. They have trained investigators that are Class 1 certified law enforcement officers. They go and interview witnesses. They can subpoena documents if they see, even issues that are, if they come across other issues in the course of their investigation, they can investigate those as well.
All right,
Good enough. Thank
Councilmember Griffin, briefly, and then Councilmember
Just
Gregory.
quick points, I promise. Mr. Majernik, that $50,000 number, all of that money was appropriated before the start of this year. We have not additionally approved any monies to go towards this internal audit, have we?
Council has not approved any additional money for the audit.
Did anybody tonight touch on Chernoff Newman? Because I don't think I heard it out of the mayor. We still don't know what that was for. Did you touch on that in your?
He did.
I did. I must have missed that. I'll go back and. Did Roy Willie bill us to meet with them?
Not sure, we'll
I
come
think
back
one
to
of the-
that.
one
We've
of the-
already said we haven't summarized the Roy Willie invoices yet, so we're still working towards that.
In your addendum, you stated that one of the questions was, did Roy Willie and Sandy Tecklenburg have access to the email address? And you said you asked the mayor, and he said no. Did you happen to ask Wes Rattery in the IT department?
We have, and we have received the logins that he had, and there's no delineation, there's no clear delineation where you can pinpoint one way or the other who it was that signed on. We can show that it was outside the city network that there was a log on. We can show that it was through the OWA or website, and we can show that it's through a city computer. But there's no clear way to point out who made that login. Oh, but there's not a screenshot for the person sitting at the computer.
So, just last point. I need to know, are we going to get an opportunity to ask the mayor any of these questions? Because we keep asking the auditor these questions that really should be asked to the mayor, and then he gets to answer them with coaching, I'm sure, and put like this. I mean, I want to know, I want him to say on the record whether or not these things happen or not. I've got a laundry list of questions that I think are inappropriate that should be answered. I mean, the whole point of us meeting was, I thought, because we were going to ask the mayor these questions. And we haven't been able to do that.
We are going to have another meeting. We will set an agenda, and any requests there, we'll talk to our legal counsel and get something up. Just a personnel matter, we'll go into executive session, but I do believe that a follow-up will be had after this. Councilmember Gregory, then we get on to item number 4.
Yes, my question for the Ethics Commission. I have two questions for you. Because as an ex-HUD employee, the Secretary of HUD could initiate a complaint on its own. And I think what I just heard you say is that you also have the capacity to initiate a complaint absent a complainant if you have information, the kind of information necessary in order for you to initiate that. Am I correct?
Well, to be clear, I formerly worked at the Ethics Commission. I don't work there currently.
No, but I think I heard.
Practice, but the Ethics Commission itself, you are correct. It can get a complaint, I mean, a certified complaint from any individual or, even an organization, or it can open one on its own based on information provided. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I mean, sometimes there's somebody who doesn't want to be the whistleblower.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, that the commission can do and initiate a complaint absent a complainant. If I hear you correctly. And my next question then is, based upon the information that you have before you with regard to this audit, okay, is there enough information here for the commission to initiate an investigation on its own?
Yes. I mean, I don't want to make the hard calls, but I mean, the standard for initiating a complaint is fact sufficient.
Yes.
So they're not making any calls initially on whether the information out there is true.
Correct.
But if it was true, is it a violation of the Ethics Act? But also there's a judgment call there.
I think you answered both of my questions. That one, it can be initiated. Two, there's enough information here, okay, for the commission to initiate investigation. I think I heard you say that. Yes to that. Okay.
Yeah, yes,
My next question.
yes.
Okay. Aside from the ethics violations, okay, at what point, if ever, do you connect with the Hatch Act and Hatch Act violations?
The Ethics Commission doesn't connect
So
with the
that's
Hatch Act.
okay. So that's separate from ethics violations.
Well, I
because-
have no opinion one way or another on the Hatch Act.
Okay,
Yes.
and the reason why I'm asking is because we continue to ask for answers based upon ethics violation. I think that we also need to determine whether or not there are any Hatch Act violations. And some of what I've heard thus far, potentially there are some Hatch Act violations. But that's not a question to you. I just want to make sure that what you do is separate from Hatch Act.
Sure, and I should make clear that, I mean, as far as the Ethics Act, any kind of questions about, the public purpose of certain expenditures, generally speaking, those aren't Ethics Act issues. I mean, unless if, some of those expenditures benefited personally the mayor or a family member or a business, which we didn't find anything like that.
Now, based upon and I'm finished after this. Okay, based upon the answers that you just gave to me, will you be recommending to the commission to initiate an investigation on its own, regardless of whether or not anybody submits a complaint? Because if I heard you correctly, you said there's enough information here, okay, that it can be initiated. So my question is, will you make recommendations for such an initiation?
I'm not sure that that's my role to make that recommendation, and I don't know whether they would listen to me anyway. I think that they'll judge the evidence, and the commission would make that call.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right.
I'm very sorry, but I think going first, I misunderstood that this was going to be around questions, and then I thought you said we were going to have a chance to make some, statements or... So I don't have a lot to say, but I do have a couple of statements, and I really appreciate now going last, because basically I came into this whole report with Mr. Majernik's detailed audit and the recommendations to follow each one of his findings and observations in correspondence to to Mr. Birchstead's memo, expecting that no matter what happened in terms of the mayor explaining the findings from his point of view, that we would be working hard as a Councilmember Lewis, to follow all of the recommendations and improve on them. So I don't think that there is any question that we're not sitting here telling the truth, listening to the truth, getting to more truth. I admire all the time you all have spent getting down into, stacks of documents and all of that. But I thought that this was going to be sort of the beginning of an improvement process, because that really is what we're developing here, where there's an opportunity for people to make mistakes or not be well trained or have inconsistencies between our ordinances and our procedures. So that's the assumption that I came into this whole process with. And on that basis, I think this is a good day for Charleston and not a sad day. We are sitting here bringing things into the light that are only going to benefit us as the decision-making leaders of our community for the time being that we're elected and have that privilege, and our city into the future. So thank you very much, Mr. Majernik, for being on the hot seat in terms of just, needing to ask hard questions of the people that are supervising you and employing you. And I hope that you feel, well appreciated and strong in your ability to do what you did, because you've definitely proved yourself. So thank you very much, Council Member.
All right, item number 4, before we get into it, it shows on there, Councilmember Griffin asked for it. A number of people have talked about this, so just so I'm clear in our understanding, one of the questions that's come up during this process, and because we're going to have another meeting, I think it's good for discussion purposes now, and we can put it on for a vote either through the audit committee or for council later, is the manner in which we structurally handle internal audits, which include but are not limited to the mayor's office and the reporting mechanism for Mr. Majernik. Am I correct that that's the concern that
That
items.
was the second part of mine.
Okay, and so as a prelude to that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Griffin.
So, not only that, but also, this is really the first of its kind, and I know Councilmember Seekings, you made some public comments about whether or not you should recuse yourself, and I'm wondering, I think that needs to be discussed too. If you're not going to preside over the next meeting, or if you're going to recuse yourself, or you think other people should, we should make that public too. I just think people deserve to know, and we should know going into the next meeting what to expect on that.
I fully plan to be here unless something comes up that would otherwise require me to recuse myself, and I think everybody else here does too. I've never heard nothing yet that would change that. Now, back to the reporting structure. Do we want to talk about that? Pardon me? Oh, so the reporting position of Mr. Majernik? So my feeling is, from what I've heard and what we've seen, I do believe at this point, structurally, he's in a tough position. I mean, you will remember, I've now been chairman of the audit committee for 10 years, and because we only meet once a year, usually, I always start our meetings by stating, and it was formerly Ms. Wharton, now Mr. Majernik, that they have the loneliest, toughest job in America, because they do. And let me tell you, it's not lonely anymore, it's both lonely and very difficult. So I do think we should look at the structure of how the internal auditor reports out, because among the duties that he has, as we've seen in full pages right here during the last couple of months, one of the things he has to do is audit his boss. So I'm certainly, and I think this council, it's a committee of the whole, I'm open to suggestions about how we restructure that. I don't know how that actually quite is going to work, and we may need some legal advice on it, because we're also part of the process. It may be that Mr. Majernik is banging on our door too. In fact, one of the things that's been asked in this audit is for him to look at our expenditures and our expenses. So how do we do that? So I'm certainly open the floor to any discussion about that. I do think that any decision we make on this should follow the close of this audit. I don't think we should make a structural change in the middle of an audit. I think that would probably not be the best thing we ever did, but hopefully we're going to close this out. So I see someone ready to hit the mic, so.
Yeah, I would just, I'm a little uncomfortable changing horses in midstream right now. And so I would be interested from Mr. Majernik's point of view. My thought was that he would report to the audit committee, which is a committee of the whole, that in our budgetary process that we would, just like everybody else, maybe in connection with the mayor, look at salaries and what have you. But I think we need to kind of spread out that authority. I wouldn't want him reporting just to me, because for the same reason, if I'm the one that's doing something, then he's in a bind.
Yep.
And so I think the more we can spread out that, the more maybe secure Robert would be, or whoever's in his position. So that's that. And I'm a little bit even weary of talking about it right now. It's almost like, let's get this over with, and then do, as we go through this ad hoc budget process, that we look at that as one of the items and look at it from the legal standpoint. It does, we're almost taking something away from the mayor's office. We need to be sure we're on solid grounds when we do that.
I totally agree with that. I think that's the right approach. I do think it's something we need to look at, though.
Right.
I don't think it should be midstream.
Yeah, I think even discussing it right now gives me a little bit of, I trust Robert. Let's finish this and then talk about it and take the names out of it.
Certainly have a motion to limit discussion on this item and put it off until the end of our next meeting, however you all want to handle it. It is an agenda item that's on here, so, yes, sir. Councilmember Waring.
I agree with what's just been said, but I definitely think the system of him reporting should change. I think he should report to the committee of the whole. So whenever that conversation comes about, that's the way I would lean. But I think we made a mistake. We really put our people in the, number one, we didn't know it was going to go as far as it's going to go. And Councilman Gregory said it. I think once you get down this path, I guess we finish it, but we really should have done this with an independent auditor. we would not have had to have, the whole question about $50,000 would have been easy, okay? It wouldn't have been the, well, I'm going to account for my time, I'll tell you that. And I don't even think the legal counsel would have been in a position, our legal department would have been in a position of hiring an outside attorney. The outside auditor would have been doing their job, we'd have continued doing ours, and eventually a report would be made. So I think this will be a lesson to not only the mayor, but all 12 of us, because when we voted to do this internal audit, it was a unanimous vote, 13 to nothing. It wasn't a divided vote. So going forward, if we're going to have an audit of this magnitude, I think it should be independent and not internal for the reasons that not only our staff have found out, but we too have found out. The precarious position that they've been placed in is unfair. Councilman Gregory said it, and I agree with it, but I hope we never do that again. And quite frankly, when it came to some of these emails where our professionals, frankly, gave advice to the mayor, I wasn't familiar with those emails until they were read today, frankly. I guess I haven't gone through the 850 documents. I'm telling them I didn't do that homework. But I will. When you get advice, and I know we do all the time, the mayor and his staff, we get almost just as much advice from the legal staff, accounting, parks and recreation, stormwater, public works. The departments go on and on. They give us the best advice that they can. But when you are in between a rock and a hard place, between a mayor and a council on differing views, you really need some independence. So I would think going forward, and I think finishing up this audit, quite frankly, I know you don't like to change horses in the middle of the stream, but I still think independence will have its place in this reporting, because even in the mayor's self-reporting, and I think that's noble of you, the self-report, Mr. Mayor, I don't know that some of these emails would make it to the Ethics Commission. Could be overlooked, could be missed. And you know what? We're talking about whether outside counsel will report something. You know, the hard decision is going to have to be made right here. If council votes to file for an ethics investigation, then I guess there would be a complaint to be investigated, Councilor. So I don't know that we can hire people. They can give us advice, but the call needs to come, whether we will or not, should come back to this body. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Lewis and Councilmember White.
Again, you're talking about changing the way the auditor reports. That's going to be changing. We need to bring that to City Council, because we're going to be changing our ordinance. Got to be in our ordinance, so we need to bring it up probably sometime in September. Y'all want to change it? We need to bring it to City Council. If this council don't want to file any kind of complaints with the Ethics Commission, any individual, any 12 person sitting around this table feel that he or she wants to do it, that's their right. They have the right to do it. But we shouldn't have to make that call as a council. Because right now, we got information before us. Some of us might feel that there's something else needs to be done, and some of us don't. So if any individual sitting here wants to file something with the Ethics Commission, that's their right. It doesn't say that the whole council got to do it.
I think Councilmember Lewis is right, but consistent with, among others, Councilmember Gregory's view on we should run things through committees. I do think the structure of this, when it finally does come to council, should come through the audit committee. I do agree with Councilmember Moody, and I think there's a general consensus that this is not the perfect time to be doing this, but sooner rather than later is better. So I think that's the way we should look at it. Councilmember White had his hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines with regards to the auditor's reporting structure, I think one of the challenges that I have identified through this process in our system, if you will, is a lack of, for lack of better words, a whistleblower policy or ordinance. It's clear to me after reviewing just a few emails that there were a number of employees that had some serious concerns about the activities and actions of the mayor and the mayor's office, and subsequently, if they felt confident and comfortable in being able to state those facts, we may have headed this off well before we got to this point. So I would certainly hope that, I don't know that it's an item that this body would take up, and maybe the HR committee would look into making sure that if we have a whistleblower policy, that it's ironclad, and if it's not, they need to go back. But they also need to make sure that our employees recognize and know that they will be protected through this process in the event that they do come forward with information that they feel meaningful. And I have to commend our employees. Let me tell you how proud I was to read an email from a staff member who is not a department head and wasn't even a manager, but called to question the actions of the administration. And it was solely based on the fact that they didn't feel comfortable that that was the right use of city taxpayers' dollars. We should all feel very proud of staff members for doing that. They have the best interest at heart of our city, and that's commendable, but we need to make sure that goes all the way to the top. Thank you.
Further discussion?
I just going to say this last thing that's on my mind. If this had started 5 or 10 years ago, maybe the city might have been in a better position. We have had citizens in this city. We've had workers in this city that filed complaints, and you know what happened to them? They lost their job and they had to file a confidentiality statement. So this thing just ain't starting right here with the mayor's office. There's a lot of stuff been going on in this city that maybe 12 of us sitting on this corner might not have been just 12, but council members should have known. They didn't know. But I can tell you some good people got fired from the city for telling the truth on their boss and had to sign a confidentiality statement before they could even draw their retirement money. So we need to think about how we think about things. Okay.
Councilmember.
With all due respect, Councilmember Lewis, we can't worry about the past.
Oh, no, I worry about the past because it's happened to some of my people. You know, we're doing this at the mayor, but this is happening, and it's happened right when some people sitting around this table has been working in the city council, in the city, or sitting on the city council, so no.
Well,
I'm not looking, if you're looking at the past, no.
Chair is recognized, Councilmember Griffin.
I mean, all I'm saying is that we can't worry about what didn't happen before and who didn't make decisions before. We have an opportunity to do something now. And if we can make sure that our city employees have the ability to share information that they feel compromises integrity, they should do that without any repercussion whatsoever. And I'm sorry that practice should have been done 10 years ago, but that shouldn't be a reason why we shouldn't do it now.
Okay, so my general understanding that the will of this committee is that the discussion on the internal audit reporting structure will continue following the closure of this audit. It will run through the audit committee and take it to city council. Does that suit you? All right, before we, yes, sir.
Let me ask our attorney one other question.
Michael, because I know we're in crazy season right now, and my understanding is that the Ethics Commission will not undertake any kind of investigation 60, 90, some days before an election. I mean, I don't want to run afoul of that, but I don't want to just ignore this either.
Well, you're correct. The standard is 50 days inside of an election, and then also, I don't have the exact days there, but if they don't think, if it's more than 50 days outside of an election, but the Ethics Commission doesn't think they can finish the investigation within 30 days of the election, then they will probably, if it's a viable complaint, accept the complaint and then take it up after the election. And that's the process.
No, I just wanted council to know that we're running up against a wall. If we want something quick, it's probably not going to happen.
But I think it's highly unlikely, given the Ethics Commission's practice and their schedule, that they could get this done in time anyway. I mean, they just had a meeting. They meet in the odd months every third Thursday. So there was just one in July last week. So the next one's in September, and that would just be, there's just no way it can happen, really. Sure.
All right. Thank you. before we get towards structure and adjournment, I did forget to do one thing, which was take up approval of the minutes from our July 15th, 2019 meeting. Do I have a motion? Any additions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. All right, so here's where I think we are. We've received more information from Mr. Majernik. There's been one round of questioning from City Council. We've gotten a report from Mr. Majernik that there is still work to be done on this audit, that he has told us that he can have it completed by the 15th of August, and that would be a good day to meet. We've heard an objection from Councilmember Lewis on that date. I would like to at least tentatively set that date, subject to some conversations with Councilmember Lewis, just to give Mr. Majernik a target to get this report done and get it back to City Council. For any comment in the interim, as chair and through our legal counsel, we will take any suggestions on what the agenda will look like for the next meeting. It will certainly include the presentation of the final report, and we will go from there. So any comment on just sort of structure as to where we're going to go from here? This does... 3 to 5 is my thoughts, yes. 15th. Councilmember Lewis said that he wasn't sure yet, and we will certainly give him some latitude as he looks at his schedule. This is a committee of the whole. This is a tough year. I mean, a tough time of year. I get that. So, yes, sir, Councilmember Waring.
You know, I know what the draft was was under wraps. But going forward, can we get any of this information before we come in? I mean, give it to the mayor, give it to us. I'm talking the information that you're going to review for the 15th, the additional questions that have come forward. Do we get a chance to look at any of that information prior to the 15th?
Let me just...
The reason I say that...
If we do that, I'd like to push it back a week, and that gives us time to give it done on the 15th, and then...
Can I just make sure we understand what the question... I think what you're asking is, can we see, for instance, the documents, the FOIA requests, all of that, which is already in the public realm,
right.
Not necessarily your conclusions,
right.
But the documents that are coming. Am I right about that?
That's right. That's what I mean. In other words...
So those documents are available, and I think we can make sure they get, and anything that addition comes to Mr. Majernik, we will make sure they get to council. But I would like to see if we can keep on track for the 15th. He will get us his report as soon as he can, and we'll all see it at the same time.
The reason I'm saying is we can have some of our questions prior to coming
Right.
here. That's why.
Totally get it, and with the document, and it's a lot of documents, if you see something in there, get it to Mr. Majernik. Yes, sir, Councilmember Griffin.
I mentioned before about being able to ask the mayor questions, and you had mentioned an executive session for that.
No, I didn't say for that. I said we will look at an agenda between now and then, and it may or may not include, depending on where we go.
I would
an
suggest,
executive
I would like to see on our next agenda an opportunity to ask some of these questions about, well, if we have an opportunity by that point to look at all the documents, then we should be able to ask the mayor some questions.
Noted. All right, anything else really very good?
I do,
Move for
Mr.
adjournment of the audit committee. Move to the city council.
So your motion is second. Before I go, I do want to echo, I think on behalf of everybody at City Council and the mayor, we get it. You've been tough road to hoe. He's been going through a whole lot, not just this audit. It's been a rough road, so thank you for all you've done for our city. You'll never be completely appreciated, but appreciated nonetheless, so thank you. And I think Councilmember Gregory said it well, we admire but don't envy you. So with that, we've got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Until we meet again on August 15th, I bid you adieu.